Welcome to Hydrogen Rising, a bi-weekly podcast created and hosted by the global law firm K&L Gates that brings you analysis of critical, cutting-edge issues impacting the global hydrogen market. We look forward to your engagement and feedback. And of course, don't hesitate to reach out if you have ideas about new topics you'd like us to cover.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Hydrogen Rising. I'm Sandi Safro, and I'll be your host for today's episode, which is going to focus on Germany. To help guide us through the conversation, I have the pleasure of being joined today by my colleague, Annette Mutschler-Siebert, who is a partner in K&L Gates Berlin office. Annette was one of the authors of the Germany chapter of the Hydrogen Handbook and focuses her practice on public procurement law as well as European competition and commercial law. Annette has been doing some really interesting work in the hydrogen space, which I want to talk more about. But before we dive in there, I'd like to zoom out a little bit and talk about Germany itself. Germany has been a leader in the development of hydrogen at scale. Our listeners may remember that from our first episode, my Hydrogen Rising co-host, David Wachner, and I really started to focus in on hydrogen after a meeting with a German delegation in our Washington, D.C. office in the fall of 2019. During that meeting, one of the members of the delegation asked us how much hydrogen we were blending in our pipelines in the U.S. While the U.S. is now starting to blend hydrogen in natural gas pipelines in limited areas, for example, in portions of the local distribution systems in California and New York, there are some pilot projects underway. Germany already was engaging in blending at the time of our fall 2019 meeting. Blending is, of course, only part of the larger plan that Germany has in place, and perhaps that's actually a good place for us to start. We have a lot of information on the German national strategy and the Hydrogen Handbook, but Annette, can you talk us through what the German national strategy seeks to accomplish at a high level and what industries Germany is anticipating will be the first movers in the hydrogen economy at scale?
Sure, Sandi. Thanks so much for having me in this podcast. I'm excited to be here and happy to give some insights on the German National Hydrogen Strategy. It was announced on June 10th last year, and it basically contains a firm commitment of the German government to support the introduction of hydrogen technologies at scale in various sectors in Germany. The funding behind it is pretty impressive. It's about 9 billion euros that shall go into hydrogen projects in the next couple of years, 7 of which into projects in Germany and 2 into international collaboration projects. There are basically 3 points that seem particularly relevant to me about the strategy. So first, the National Hydrogen Strategy is not the start of Germany's involvement in hydrogen, but rather marks the second phase of it, the market ramp up. The first phase of this strategy was kicked off already in 2006. About 1.2 billion euro have flown into hydrogen research projects between 2006 and 2016. And important R&D groundwork has been laid. There have been joint research projects with universities and companies. And then in 2016, additional means for such research have been opened up for the period until 2026. And now comes the new National Hydrogen Strategy of June 2020. And that has the goal to use all that has been and is still being developed to basically kickstart the market, meaning the focus has now shifted to supporting and starting operative projects, be it construction of electrolyzers, pilot projects for hydrogen use in different industries, or incentives for a hydrogen trading market. The second point is the strategy highlights certain sectors as being the closest to marketability or economic viability, and thus somehow low-hanging fruits on which to focus first. The first one is the transport sector, in which in particular long-haul truck propulsion, as well as public transportation and hydrogen buses and trains are seen to be feasible at short term. And actually, some of those have already been procured today. And the second industry is the steel and chemical industry, which already uses hydrogen in various ways, but that's gray hydrogen. And it shall be in future be decarbonized by transferring to the use of green hydrogen. And last but not least, the German hydrogen strategy has been announced only days before the EU one, which was already the subject of another podcast, I know. And thus, both programs are very closely linked, and German politicians have already made it clear from the beginning that international cooperation will be needed to make the hydrogen market economically viable and to be able to overcome current regulatory hurdles with an aligned, standardized new regulation.
Thank you, Annette. That's really helpful. You talked a little bit in your response initially about investment, and we've talked in prior episodes and in some of the thought leadership pieces that are available on the K&L Gates website about the important role that government investment and incentives are going to play for the development of hydrogen at scale, particularly in the early stages. What kinds of investments and incentives are you seeing for hydrogen in addition to the incentives that you already mentioned?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Even if the German strategy aims at kickstarting the market, there will be a startup period during which the market cannot function without state support. In particular, since the price for green hydrogen is currently still pretty high, but it is expected to drop considerably till 2030 due to further R&D and to the scaling up of projects. So state support until that kickstarting of the market is basically provided in three different ways in Germany. We've got public tender procedures. Public contracting authorities are procuring hydrogen trains or hydrogen buses. They can either do that exclusively, like requesting hydrogen buses, or preferring hydrogen solutions in the evaluation of bids. That's the first way. The second one is direct granting of state subsidies for R&D and operative hydrogen projects. And then there's a somewhat hybrid way in between, like, for example, the German government initiative H2 Global, which helps consortia invest in the production of green hydrogen abroad through an auction model.
Thank you. You mentioned gray hydrogen and green hydrogen, and we recently did an episode on the colors of hydrogen, which our listeners will remember are a shorthand way for describing the production pathway that's employed to produce hydrogen. Is there a color or colors that you see Germany focusing on mainly? And if so, what challenges do you see to that focus?
Yes, the colors of hydrogen are always an important part of the discussion. The German hydrogen strategy has a clear focus on green hydrogen being produced and used in Germany, meaning that the hydrogen used in Germany shall generally be produced in a CO2 neutral way by using renewable energy only. However, the German government recognizes that the expected overall growing hydrogen demand of about 90 to 110 terawatt hours in 2030 will not be coverable by German production of green hydrogen alone, even if all the projects currently envisaged go live. So there will be a significant need for import of hydrogen as well. And there again, this shall preferably be green hydrogen, but at least for an interim period, there may need to be a certain flexibility for also importing blue hydrogen. And a similar approach is being followed with regard to the mentioned industries. We will be starting off by using hydrogen as a byproduct to reduce CO2 emissions. The ultimate goal here as well is to replace coal and other fossils as raw materials with green hydrogen in the future.
You mentioned importing hydrogen into Germany and kind of sticking with the theme of working with other countries. I'd be curious, with so much happening in Germany and so much on the horizon, whether you see a place for foreign investors to come into Germany and play a role in the country itself.
Yes, absolutely. To be honest, I think now is a perfect time to invest in hydrogen projects and products in Germany. While the state is willing to provide funding in the current startup phase of market operation, this shall in the end give way to a competitive market. And in this market, early investors will, of course, have a considerable competitive advantage. There is nothing in the German procurement or state aid rules that would prevent foreign investors from participating and applying. They can go in as can any German company. On the contrary, a project like the already mentioned H2 Global funding explicitly incentivizes trade across borders. The idea there is to conduct a dual auction process in which to select the best offer prices for long-term import contracts for green hydrogen on one hand. On the other hand, the best prices offered for the purchase of such hydrogen in Germany. and then only subsidizing the delta between the two, thus giving investors certainty of investment and creating competitive market structures which over time will function without state subsidies.
That's great. Thank you. It's abundantly apparent to me, and I think it will be to our listeners also, that you've been doing quite a lot of work on hydrogen related matters. And I would be curious, with that in mind, if you see any challenges right now for hydrogen in Germany, or challenges perhaps on the horizon that you think we should be bearing in mind.
Yes, I've seen hydrogen projects and regulatory aspects of those becoming a more and more significant part of my practice over the last years, which is not all that natural, as I'm an antitrust and government contracts lawyer, as you said. But hydrogen is playing an increasing role in all these areas. So I have, for example, advised bidders and contracting authorities, so the state authorities, with regard to tender procedures for the procurement of hydrogen infrastructure or hydrogen trains and buses, including all the various regulatory questions surrounding approvals and subsidies. So that's quite a difficult regulatory environment. On the antitrust side of my practice, we've seen several transactions where global players in the transportation or industries have bought innovative small hydrogen players, and we have to notify these to the competition authorities. And one very important and interesting aspect is when companies join and do joint research in the space, it's very important that the whole structuring of IP rights and rights of use clauses has been done in line with European competition law. So that's something I think people should be aware of.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that's a really good point for our listeners to bear in mind. As we've gone through the podcast episodes to date, we've talked about a number of projects that we're excited to watch. And I think the projects that we've been excited to watch have varied depending on the area of expertise that we've been talking about. And I'd be curious what some of the projects are that you're watching and that you're excited about are.
Yeah, there's so much going on at the moment that I almost can't decide. It's certainly very exciting to watch two very large, allegedly the largest constructions of electrolyzers in Leuna and Hamburg, progressing after international investor consortia have been found. The Leuna project shall start operations in 2022 already. So that's really close now. But what I personally am the most thrilled about at the moment is a development by Fraunhofer Institute, which is called Power Paste. And it is based on magnesium hydride. It provides a safe way of storing hydrogen in a chemical form that is easy to transport and replenish without the need for high pressure tanks or an expensive network of refilling stations. Industrial production of that paste shall start end of this year. So I think that creative solutions like this one may prove to become a game changer for modern mobility.
That's a very interesting one. We've talked in prior episodes a lot about some of the challenges to the middle part of the supply chain transporting hydrogen. So that would be a very interesting one to watch. I had one last question for you, Annette, and I think we've maybe buried the lead here a little bit on your ties to hydrogen on a personal level. But I do think that it fills out the picture for where Germany is at. So my question for you is if you can tell us about what is parked in your driveway these days.
Yes, I'm the proud owner and enthusiastic driver of a hydrogen car. I had been thinking about this for quite a while due to my professional involvement with hydrogen projects. And then I realized that not only were there 5 hydrogen fuel stations in Berlin alone, and I think about 100 in Germany as a whole, but the fuel station right next to my home, which is literally like 300 meters away, does also sell hydrogen. So I thought that has to be fate. And I went to great lengths to get a hydrogen car, and I'm really, really happy with it. And it somehow seems as if I might have started a trend among my friends and colleagues. At least many of them have said this could be an idea for their next car as well. So let's see how that develops.
That's amazing. Well, I think we can leave it there for today's episode. Annette, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Sure, happy to.
Thank you also to our listeners. If you have any questions about the topics that we discussed today, please feel free to reach out to either one of us. As always, if you're interested in the Hydrogen Handbook and haven't had a chance to take a look at it, please check out our website, klgates.com/hydrogen. You can also find our Hydrogen Rising podcast episodes there, as well as on your favorite podcast app on your phone. So please hit subscribe, and we will be back with another episode of Hydrogen Rising in 2 weeks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Hydrogen Rising. Be sure to subscribe to receive timely notifications of future episodes, and check out our market-leading publication, the Hydrogen Handbook, on our website at www.klgates.com.